What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason, and in today's video, I figured I'd do some NFL content. I wanted to talk about some of the storylines that I'm going to be tracking in the NFL this season. Not limited to these 10 things, of course, but I think these are 10 of the bigger storylines that I'm tracking going into this 2023 NFL season. And with that said, let's get started. So there's not really going to be a structure or order to this video. I'm just going to be going through the topics that I have on the board as I thought of them, and just kind of give you my thoughts on them. And the first one I want to talk about today is the AFC Divisional Races, and I think it's going to be very interesting this year. I think you have legitimately 4 divisions that could be really good races this year. I think the AFC South maybe lags a little bit behind in terms of that, but I think the other 3 divisions are really stacked, almost top to bottom. I think you look at the AFC East, you got the Dolphins, Bills, and Jets, and I think that, the Bills have won it the last 3 years, but the other teams have been gaining on them, and honestly, as a Bills fan, I'm kind of nervous that they won't be able to take the division this year. I still think they're the favorites, but I think the other teams are getting closer, and I'm interested to see how it plays out this season. In the AFC West, of course, you got the Chiefs, Chargers, Raiders, and Broncos as well. So I think that it'll be interesting to see if any team can really challenge the Chiefs this season. I know the Chargers have went toe-to-toe with them in the past, but in terms of record by the end of the season, can some team get a better record than the Chiefs? I really highly doubt it because of how the Chiefs have played the last few years. So I think at the end of the day, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens because of all these great quarterbacks that we have in the AFC right now. I could have just put AFC quarterbacks on the board because that is just a storyline in and of itself. So I'm excited to see what happens. And then, of course, in the AFC North, you got, really a battle royale going on with the Bengals, Ravens, Steelers, Browns. I think all of those teams, you can make a case for them to win the division. I'm just really excited to see who makes the playoffs this year and who wins each division in the AFC. Now, the next storyline I have is a guy that's gotten a lot of hype going into this season, and that is Justin Fields, quarterback for the Chicago Bears, who obviously is just such a great athletic player, so he can really rely on that running game. But I think the big question that people have for him is his passing ability. I mean, he really struggled in that his first couple seasons in the NFL, but we've seen guys in the past make a big jump in year 3 as a quarterback in the league, most notably Josh Allen. I can attest to that as a Bills fan, so I'm really interested to see what happens with Justin Fields this year, really tracking him because he was a really exciting player to watch last year for the Bears, but I think ultimately the Bears did end up with a huge losing streak to end the year, got the number 1 overall pick, which of course they traded, so they really do believe in Justin Fields' development, so we'll see if he gets that big next step in his development this year. The next one I have on the board here is the wide openness of the NFC this year. I think that at the top, you got the Eagles and the 49ers. Most people would tell you those are the 2 best teams. They were the 2 best teams last year, so we'll see what happens with them if either of those teams has a bit of a fall off. The Eagles, I don't expect to have a 14-3 record like they did last year. I think they'll come back to earth a little bit, but I think at the end of the day, they'll still be up there in the conversation for that number 1 seed in the NFC. But I think underneath those 2 teams, San Francisco and Philly, I think there's a lot of room for other teams to get into the mix there in the NFC. So I'm really excited. Dallas could even push Philly for that division. They were very close to doing that last year. We're just a couple of games behind, but had a really excellent record as well. So I think the wide openness of the NFC is something I'm watching this year. The next topic on the board is the Detroit Lions. The hype around this team going into this year, obviously the way they ended last year, such a great run that they just fell short of the playoffs on a tiebreaker with Seattle. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with them this year. I mean, they're getting a lot of love from the national media, so excited to see if they can live up to it this year. A lot of people picking them to win the division, myself included. Spoiler alert for my season predictions video, but I think at the end of the day, the Lions have a lot of hype to live up to for the first time in a while, so I'm excited to see the energy that is brought into this team this season, and I think that they definitely could do something special here, like I said, in a wide open NFC. The next storyline I'm tracking is kind of a weird one, and that is the running back free agent additions that we could see in the middle of this season. Like, you look at the running back free agents right now in the NFL, and basically it's a Pro Bowl roster from, if you go back to the 2019 season, those guys were just at the top of the league in terms of running back production, but all of them are currently without a team. And I think a couple of those guys can really help a team still. Obviously, Dalvin Cook was released by the Minnesota Vikings this past offseason, so I'm excited to see who he lands with. A lot of speculation that it could be the Jets, maybe the Bills, maybe another team in the AFC East like the Dolphins. So we'll see what happens with that. Obviously, you have Leonard Fournette as well, Super Bowl champion with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Kareem Hunt, who obviously was a very productive player with the Chiefs, and then last year with the Browns. So I'm excited to see what happens with those running backs that are still out on the market. Ezekiel Elliott is another name as well. So, I mean, like, a lot of big names, and I think a couple of those guys, if they land in the right situation in the middle of this season, they could help a team. So I'm excited to see what happens with that and the storyline that I'm tracking this year. Then the next one over here is more of an obvious storyline for me, and that is the Aaron Rodgers experiment with the New York Jets. And I think that it's very interesting how Brett Favre played for the Jets near the end of his career after playing basically his whole career in Green Bay. So I think it's interesting to see the symmetry there, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out for Rodgers. In Favre's case, he had a pretty good season for the Jets, but ultimately they fell short of the playoffs. I think the Jets will probably be a playoff team this year, but I think the competition, like I said, in the AFC is very fierce. And I think the Jets, with their defense, they could really, challenge teams in the AFC if they have really good quarterback play. So I think a lot of it is up to Aaron Rodgers if he can, have a bounce back season from what he had last year. Obviously, that was the first year he didn't have Devontae Adams in Green Bay. So I think that problem will be solved by having Garrett Wilson in New York. So I think at the end of the day, I do expect Rodgers to play well and the Jets to be a playoff team, but it's going to be a fascinating season this year in New York. And then related to that, his old team, the Green Bay Packers, who are entering a new era with Jordan Love at quarterback. Obviously, they're coming off, back-to-back Hall of Fame quarterbacks in Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, like I just mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep that going, if there's a bit of a transition period where Love kind of grows into that starting role. So I'm interested to see what happens in Green Bay this season. I think it's going to be really, really, really interesting to see if Green Bay can kind of maintain their prominence that they've had for really the better part of the last 2 or 3 decades in the NFL. Then the next topic on the board is, more of just, from a human being perspective, just the fact that I didn't believe this would ever happen, and that is the return of Demar Hamlin to the football field. And I think after what we saw last season as NFL fans, it was quite shocking, obviously. I mean, it left a mark on a lot of us, and we were just kind of really, hoping for Demar Hamlin's health at that point, and we never really imagined, a lot of people never really imagined, myself included, that he would be back on a football field, especially this quickly. And, he's participating in Bills training camp. I think that there's maybe even a slight chance that the Bills could cut him, even though it would be a public relations disaster. They got a deep safety room right now, so I'm interested to see what happens with that. Ultimately, I do expect them to keep him, but situation worth monitoring. Hamlin is, kind of a fringe player when it comes to the NFL, hasn't really established himself as a full-time starter yet, so I think there is a chance that we could see a controversy here with a cut, but at the end of the day, just the fact that he's back on the football field from a human being perspective, that is incredible, and I'm really excited to see the reaction when he's back on the field in Buffalo for the first preseason game and the first regular season game. Now, second to last here on the board, I have Deshaun Watson of the Cleveland Browns, who obviously had a lot of negative press around him over the court cases that he was facing over the past couple of years here, but I think when he came back from that long suspension last year, he did not look very good, so I think there's so much pressure on him this year in Cleveland, given what Cleveland gave up to Houston in that trade, multiple draft picks, that massive contract to Watson, so I think there's so much pressure on Deshaun Watson to play well this year with the Browns in a very tough AFC North, so I think it could go a number of different ways. I think that Cleveland has the talent to compete for first place in the AFC North, but I think at the end of the day, I don't trust them to do that with what we saw last season, and Watson not looking the best after having about a 2-year break from football because the season before he didn't play while sitting out for the Houston Texans. So, I mean, all eyes on Deshaun Watson this season, and if he can have that bounce back and get back to that elite level that we saw. I mean, a couple of years ago, I thought he was a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. And then the last storyline I have on the board is more of a coaching story, and that is Sean Payton, head coach of the Denver Broncos. Of course, previously head coach of the New Orleans Saints, won a Super Bowl there, but he's facing a different challenge here in Denver, trying to recapture the form that Russell Wilson had earlier in his career with Seattle. I think it's going to be very interesting to see if he can get the most out of Russell. I expect him to run the ball a lot, and I think another thing that puts a little bit more intrigue into this is the fact that Sean Payton actually went public and actually criticized the previous coaching staff of a Nathaniel Hackett with the Broncos, who obviously a lot of people criticized for doing a poor job last year in the disastrous season that they had. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see if Sean Payton can get this ship turned around quickly in Denver. Obviously a very talented defense, have very talented receivers, but I think they have to maximize that talent, and a lot of that comes down to Sean Payton, the head coach of this organization. So at the end of the day, those are just some of the storylines from tracking this NFL season. Maybe I'll do another video if this is a big hit, and do additional storylines I'm watching this season. But those are just some of the storylines I'm watching this year, and ultimately at the end of the day, I'm just so excited for this 2023 NFL season. And be sure to let me know your thoughts down below. And with that said, I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.